Welcome to the channel. Let's see if this recipe is one you need to keep in your back pocket because we're making gluten-free pita bread. You know, pita pocket bread. Is this one you should keep or not? I did have a couple challenges, but is it now good enough for you guys to make too? I'm Jamie with SavorySaver. I share gluten-free recipes, tips, tricks, and resources to make your gluten-free lifestyle easier. So let's get started. So before we actually start making this recipe, let's just go over a few things that I want to touch base on and then some other things that I will go through as we go through the recipe because I haven't made this yet. So the recipe comes from the website glutenfreerecipebox.com. Ton of gluten-free recipes on there to look through. So definitely maybe check that out if you're looking for gluten-free recipes. There's a lot of bread recipes on there and plenty that I would like to try myself. This recipe, really easy ingredients to find. Rice flour, cornstarch, potato starch, all stuff you probably have in your pantry. Nothing crazy. It does use xanthan gum to, bind everything together. It is a food processor recipe. So hopefully you have a food processor. I haven't done a whole lot of recipes with the food processor. Sometimes I feel they work for me, sometimes they don't. It just kind of depends. So I'm excited to try this one. I don't have to get the mixer out, but I do have to clean the food processor now. There are multiple ways to bake these pita pockets. The first way is with a pizza stone. That is the way I will be doing it. I do feel that that's actually going to give you the best results. So if you have a pizza stone, that's going to be what to use. If you don't have a pizza stone, some things I don't recommend people getting. Just depends on how much use they're going to get out of it. If you're going to use a pizza stone once a month, they're cheap enough. I think it's worth it. We do all our gluten-free pizzas on it. If I'm cooking a frozen gluten-free pizza for Tara, I dig out the stone. If she's cooking it, she throws it on the rack. But the pizza stone really does provide good results. And again, they're not super expensive. So if you do gluten-free pizzas at home or, gluten-free rolls you want to reheat and stuff like that, it's not a bad tool to have. If you do not have a pizza stone but want to try this recipe, there are instructions for making it on just a baking pan. They're a little different, and I am going to read over all of those when we get to that point. So be ready for those tips. And this recipe tells you how to store them. So hopefully I don't forget to make sure I go over that part. We will probably go over that at the end as I test the actual taste of these and go over any recipe tips that I found along the way. Okay, enough chatting from me. Let's really get to making this bread, shall we? Okay, so for the recipe, I've got my food processor out. It does say to use a small food processor, but you also have to use the spout to pour in the liquid. So this is the smallest I have. I do have the bowl insert, so it's a little smaller. If you do not have a small bowl like this, I would definitely try it in your regular food processor. The main thing is to keep the dough down towards the bottom. I don't think it will not work. I just think that the smaller one is better, but we're gonna go with this. I also have it on here backwards, so hopefully you guys can see what's happening with the dough inside. So let's take off the lid. Let's add our dry ingredients to this. I've got a half a cup of rice flour, and I'm just using Bob's Red Mill. I've got a third of a cup potato starch, and honestly, I don't remember what brand it is, because everything ends up in containers like this. Because it used to be that I could keep one container for flour, and now of course you have 25 containers containing 25 different types of gluten-free flours. So what do you guys keep your flour in? Like all of them? Do you use containers like that? Do you keep them in the bags? Leave it in the comments below if you get a second. All right, back to our ingredients. 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. The recipe also says you can use tapioca starch. The biggest reason I'm using cornstarch is because it's a little cheaper than tapioca. So I would use one or the other, whichever you prefer. 1 teaspoon of xanthan gum. The recipe calls for a third of a teaspoon of salt. And if you're like me, you don't have any measuring utensils that measure a third of a teaspoon. So what we're gonna do is 1/4 of a teaspoon is a little less than a third. So I just rounded it a little bit to give me a third of a teaspoon of salt. That hopefully will give us enough. We don't want them salty, but we also want to make sure that we add enough salt that it's flavorful because of course salt is flavor. The last thing we're gonna add is yeast. This is 2¼ teaspoons of instant yeast. And if you'll notice, I did not proof it in the liquid this time. I'm gonna do it this way and see how it works. You know, I don't usually do that. 2¼ teaspoons is 1 packet. So if you have the packets of instant yeast, 1 packet of that will equal the 2¼ teaspoons. Let's put the lid on and give it 3 or 4 pulses just to blend everything together. Now that everything's pulsed together, we're gonna add a couple things before we add our liquid. We're gonna add 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter, and I've just cut it up into smaller pieces just to give the food processor a little bit less work to do, and I think it'll incorporate a little better. If you have salted butter, then maybe go ahead and use that and just don't add the salt, or only add like 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. The other thing we're gonna add is 1 egg white. So I'm adding that. The egg white, I'm assuming, is gonna provide some binding as well as probably give it lift. Now that the butter and the egg white are in there, we're gonna pulse this until everything looks like fine crumbs. So this point of the game, I really don't see why you couldn't do it by hand. Just, you'd have to, you know, mix it for a few minutes. But, you know, when we stream in the milk, I don't know how that's gonna go. So let's pulse this, see what it looks like. All right, let's see if we can see what this looks like for you guys. I don't know if you can see that in the camera. It's almost the consistency of what almond flour would be like, I feel. There's bigger pieces in it, of course, because of the butter, but for the most part, it kind of does have an almond flour texture. So hopefully that gives you something to go on if you make the recipe. Again, that part can be done by hand, I think. I think you're just gonna have to work it into the dough just like you would any other crumb type recipe that starts this way. The final ingredient is we're gonna add milk. The recipe calls for a 1/2 cup of 2% dairy milk or a dairy-free alternative such as almond or rice milk. I'm actually using whole milk because that's what I have in the house. So if you're going non-dairy, then I would definitely try using a non-dairy milk and switch that butter out for margarine. Now with the food processor running, I'm gonna slowly pour the milk in, running it constantly on the process mode until it forms a ball or at least a dough. All right, let's take a look at it because I can't see through the top. And I did have that milk heated up to 110 to 115 Fahrenheit to activate the yeast. And that took about 30 seconds in my microwave in the glass Pyrex measuring cup. All right, so that's what it looks like. And it does have a little bit of liquid around it. So you know what, let me process it for another 30 seconds or so to see if we can get some of that liquid to absorb. Okay, that is much better. It's pulled away from the sides of the bowl. So what I did is I processed it again just for maybe 5 or 10 seconds and then switched to pulse so I could actually see what it was doing. But that actually looks like a dough pretty well. I mean, considering it's gluten-free. So let's get this transferred over to a bowl. So it says to transfer it to an oiled bowl. So I'm just gonna use a little bit of olive oil. Use whatever oil you want, guys. The reason I'm using olive oil is there's a little bit of flavor. If I use canola, that's not gonna give me that. And if you wanna get messy, use your fingers. If you don't, use that spatula. Which, in thinking this through, I'm gonna be messy in a minute anyway because I have to get the dough out of the bowl. All right, now we have to get this into this. All right, so everything's in here, and I have to say, so far, I really like this recipe. It's not been difficult. It looks like dough, which is always a bonus when you're doing gluten-free recipes with bread. So we are gonna have to let this rise for about 20 minutes. So I'm gonna cover it with a towel. I'm actually just gonna proof it on the counter today. So if it goes a little over, I'm not worried about it. It doesn't have a long proof time, but you guys know that I usually use the oven. But during this time, I am gonna heat the oven up. So let me put this off to the side. We'll go over quickly how to get your oven ready, whether you're using your pizza stone or just a couple baking sheets. All right, so I've got my paper out. Let's go over the baking instructions while our dough rises, and then I think I'm gonna have a few minutes to be able to clean up some and get all that starch off that mixing bowl, because once it dries, it's way more work than it should be. So if you're using your pizza stone, you wanna put your pizza stone on the middle rack in the oven and set your oven to 500 degrees. The reason I agree with the recipe and thinking that this will be the best way to make these is because we want that instant heat on those dough balls. So the baking stone is level, it's consistent heat, and it's 500 degrees. So that's gonna allow that bread to puff up, and you want that pocket in the middle or it's not pita pocket, is it? If you are doing it from the baking sheet standpoint, you're only gonna preheat your oven to 425. What you will do is you will have your middle oven rack and your lower oven rack. And you are gonna start those on the lower rack for 10 minutes and then move it to the middle rack for an additional 10 minutes. That's gonna allow that bottom to get really hot faster is what that's gonna do. So you should still get your puff. It's just gonna take a little longer to bake through. With the pizza stone, it doesn't even give me a time at how long it's gonna take. They are gonna be ready when they're puffed up and become lightly golden brown. So I'm gonna attempt to get some video coverage of that, but I am using my phone, so we'll see how well that works. So let's see what I can do with that. But there's no time on that, and that's when you're gonna know that it's ready, is after it's puffed up, because that air is inside that pocket. All right, let's get to shaping these so we can get them baked, so we can see if there's a recipe we need to keep. All right, so it's been a little over 20 minutes. Let's take a look at them and get these shaped. So it's risen some, not a whole lot, and this is gonna give us 4 pita pockets. So I've got a silicone mat here, and I usually use the great big one, but this will be a little easier for me to clean, and we're only making 4. It says to place the dough on a non-stick surface. I am gonna put a little bit of oil down, just to be on the safe side. I gotta wash it anyway, might as well have some oil on it. Let's transfer this over, hopefully. It's pretty sticky already, as you can see. So let's just kind of divide it as equally as you can. Okay, now we're gonna have to figure out how to get them from here onto the baking stone. If you are doing them on the baking pan, then you want to heavily oil a baking sheet. And that way there, you're just gonna shape this and put it on there. It might even be easier to just shape and put this on the baking sheet directly. Just shape it there and then you're not trying to move it again. I'm gonna have an extra step, so we'll see how that goes. Now the more I think about it, because I'm thinking on the fly and decide to film things without making it first, I think I have a better idea for doing this on the baking stone. So let me slide this back a little bit. This is what I do with pizza, so I don't know why I wouldn't do it with these. So I've got a pizza screen. It's lightweight. I can slide my pizza on and off. I use this lots of times when I'm making gluten-free pizza, and I can't remember the last time I didn't use it for it, in all honesty. So I've got a couple pieces of parchment paper. They're just smaller scraps I didn't need for a recipe. So let's put a little bit of oil on here just to help, even though parchment paper is nonstick. So now let's transfer a little bit of the dough, 2 on each. It's actually holding together well. I like that. Now when I do it on the pizza stone, I can just slide everything out, and normally I'm pretty good at not throwing anything on the floor or the bottom of the oven. So we want to press these out into 4.5 to 5 inch circles that are about 1/4 inch high, and it says to use moist fingertips. So I've got a little bit of water in a bowl. Let's see how this does. Obviously the issue is going to be me making a circle. Let's see if it's rollable. It actually kind of makes the dough ball. That's nice. Moisten your fingertips as you need to, making it a dough ball first, just kind of working it a little bit. It's actually working really well and not sticking a whole lot, so that's nice. All right, guys, I have to say that wasn't super hard at all. I actually like how well it worked. I have just cleaned my hands, but I only had one little piece of dough sticking to me between the oil and the water. So love that. Not perfect circles. The point is for it to come out right, not necessarily perfect circles yet. I can work on that. So I'm gonna pop them in the oven. I'm gonna try to get some video footage, but I'm not sure how it's gonna do as far as how fast they're gonna puff up on me. Ultimately, I want these to taste good, and I want them to have that great big pocket in the middle. So let's see if that happens. I'm gonna get them in the oven. I'll at least get you guys a time at how long it's taken on my pizza stone, and we'll see if I can get a little bit of coverage with the camera as far as how they puff up. All right, guys, about 4.5 minutes in, they have puffed up a lot, which I think is great. It does say that they should be lightly golden, and I just popped open the oven and I can see it on the bottom, but not quite on the top yet. So I'm gonna let it go another minute, 2 minutes, and see where we're at. At that point, I'm gonna let them cool for 2 to 5 minutes before we give them a try. So it's been another 2 minutes. So this was 7 minutes and they kind of feel done. They feel airy in the middle, so I'm excited about that. Let's look at the bottom. Let's grab this one because it's the thinnest, I think. Pretty golden on the bottom. The other thing I like about this pizza screen, guys, is I was able to slide the parchment paper right back onto it, and this isn't super heavy weight, but I can transfer my bread over to a counter, or if you're using a pizza, I can just use the tongs and grab it by an edge of the crust and kind of slide it back on because it's super thin. All right, let's let these cool for just a couple minutes and then we're gonna try them. So I'm still at the oven for a couple minutes because I took the pita bread out of the oven, let it cool for about 3 minutes, and when I sliced into one, it was actually still pretty starchy in the middle and not cooked. So I threw everything back into the oven, including that sliced one, and I set the timer for another 5 minutes. I think that's gonna bring us up closer to a 15-minute mark at the 500 degrees on the pizza stone, and we're gonna see if they bake better. So now I'm just gonna watch that they don't start over browning because of course we don't want them to burn, and we'll see how they turn out. Okay, bread is done, and it is much more golden than it was originally. So these actually went for 15 minutes or so, give or take a minute probably, because I was doing a couple minutes at a time, but 15 minutes on the pizza stone. So I don't know what I was thinking when I thought that 7 minutes would be plenty of time when the temperature was 75 degrees difference and the other one's cooked for 20 if you do it on the baking sheets. In any case, I had cut it open. I had looked at it. It was starchy, which you can see on the knife that the starch is all over it. So I threw in the halves as well, and they actually cooked pretty good on the inside. It did crisp up, so we're gonna try this one, and I might cut another one too because the other one's baked the rest of the way closed. So let's try it. Those are good. They actually have a pita bread taste to me. They kind of taste like wheat. I did use white rice flour. If I did not say in the beginning, you can swap that out for brown rice flour. So there's a little more fiber in that, of course. Like, this would be good on a sandwich. Or as a sandwich. I like that taste. I think it's good. So now let's go over storage and how to keep these so you can make sure you use every one of them, even though there's 4. This would be great if you guys were doing sandwich night at home because you'd have 4, if you have a smaller family. Recipe would be doubled. You could do that because it wasn't super hard. So storage tips verbatim from the recipe. It says to wrap them in moistened paper towels and place together in a closed Ziploc storage bag. It says to steam until soft, and it says 20 to 25 minutes. I don't think that's accurate. I think they probably mean to pop them in the microwave for 20 to 25 seconds maybe to soften them. I don't know why you would steam them for 25 minutes. That's a long time. So, and it does not say microwave or other cooking methods. So I would try a moistened paper towel, not in the, in the zipper bag for 20 seconds and see what that does. Maybe even lower, maybe 10 or 15. For the pita pockets themselves, of course, you want to slice it across, and then I just took the paring knife and opened it up. You probably want to use a serrated knife for it, especially once they cool. You'll probably get better slices, but it opened up pretty well. Just take your time with it. And it's a little small, but there's no reason we can't get some chicken salad or tuna salad or egg salad in there. If you wanted it bigger, of course, then you would slice just part of this off, pick whatever side works best, and then you can make a deeper pocket, which is gonna hold more of those sandwich fillings. The recipe also suggests, instead of going this way, you go this way through the middle. So if you take your time with a serrated knife and go all the way across, then you actually have sandwich thins. So that's a great use for this if you didn't want to do pita pockets, because even the traditional gluten pita pockets I remember using, and they always broke apart anyway. So a sandwich thin would be a great idea for that. It does say to store them in the refrigerator for a couple days, wrapped in moistened paper towels. And of course, once you take them out of the fridge, you are gonna need to nuke those for a few seconds in a moistened paper towel to get those to soften back up and you get some flexibility. It also says you can freeze them. Of course, you wanna thaw them, and then you wanna microwave them for a few seconds until they're soft. A couple variations I didn't say in the beginning. It does say add a 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder or garlic powder for some added flavor. I think that's a wonderful idea if you're using these for savory sandwiches, such as chicken salad, tuna salad, all that stuff. I think that would be a great little bit of background flavor to help with that. As far as making these again, I think it's a good recipe. I see no reason not to make these again, until I find the next best recipe, of course, because if you're like me, you're always looking for that best next gluten-free recipe for whatever it is you're baking to get that traditional taste and texture that you like. In any case, what did you guys think of the recipe? Would you make it? Would you not? What do you think? Leave me the comments below. Thank you for spending some time with me today and watching the video, and I hope to see you in the next video.